Fragility, feelings, violence, polarization, depression, parenting, safetyism, and justice. All of these topics can be affected or caused by coddling, an all-encompassing idea of overprotection in modern society. Coddling of the American Mind, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure, a book written by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, references these topics and aims to solve the mystery as to why college campuses have recently been changing and moving towards a culture of safety, as well as offers advice at the end of the book to create wiser kids, wiser universities, and wiser societies as a whole. The book supports the quote, "Prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child." The authors of the book believe that children nowadays are too coddled and overprotected by parents, having almost all obstacles and hard times removed for them in childhood, causing them to not be fully prepared for college or the real world that comes afterwards. Through the support of anecdotes, statistics, examples, and visuals such as tables and diagrams, several main points are made throughout the book. First, I will focus on the three main untruths brought up at the beginning of the book. The untruth of fragility, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, the untruth of emotional reasoning, always trust your feelings, and the untruth of us versus them, life is a battle between good and evil people. These untruths are portrayed in much parenting of children today, potentially harming kids in the future. The authors advise against these untruths and offer advice in order to implement the real truths instead. Their advice includes, instead of being fragile and easily weakened, they say to seek out challenges rather than eliminating or avoiding everything that feels unsafe. Additionally, the authors advise to get away from cognitive distortions rather than always trusting your initial feelings, and to look for nuance and have an open mind rather than assuming the worst about people within a simplistic us versus them morality. Next, I will focus on the subsequent topics and chapters of the book. I already mentioned some of these main topics at the beginning of the video. When these bad ideas or untruths are put into action, they can cause intimidation and violence in the form of college protests and witch hunts. People have grown more sensitive through the three untruths and parenting nowadays, and many are now referring to words as violence. One of the largest protests described in the book happened at UC Berkeley in 2017, where Milo Yiannopoulos, a Trump supporter, was scheduled to speak. However, in order to stop him from speaking, a violent protest broke out. This protest brought up the question of if Milo's potential words could be considered violence and whether or not the protesters were justified in their violence against it. Furthermore, was this a violation of the First Amendment, restricting free speech? The authors believe that words being considered violence is a result of coddling. College students should be anti-fragile and have an open mind towards opposing viewpoints rather than be fragile and restrict another's free speech by using physical violence. These changes in college atmospheres between 2013 and 2017 can further be explained by the aspects involved in the United States' new culture of safetyism. First, political polarization has increased greatly since 2004. These increased differences between people can create more conflicts because of heavily differing views. The rising political polarization in the United States, including increases in racial and political provocation from the right, can help explain why behavior and campus climate are changing across the U.S. Another reason for the changes across colleges is the increased rate of anxiety and depression in adolescents in the 2010s. The authors suggest that the primary cause for this increase is the frequent use of smartphones by the iGen generation and less face-to-face social interaction. Members of iGen are therefore attracted to the overprotection offered by safetyism on college campuses due to students' higher levels of anxiety and depression, which cause students to see the world as more hostile than it really is. Paranoid parenting and the decline of play can also affect students on college campuses. As children are naturally anti-fragile, overprotection can make them weaker and cause them to be less resilient to change and hardships later on in life. Less free play due to parents' fears and overprotection, as well as the rise of smartphones, has deprived children of cooperation and resolution skills. Overall, paranoid parenting and the decline of play teaches children to believe in the great untruths and cause children to not have sufficient social skills, causing them to join a culture of safetyism once they are off to college because of how they were raised. Finally, social justice is an important concept in colleges today. Equality of opportunity and equality of outcome are explored, trying to remove barriers for certain students so that equality can be closer reached. Additionally, correlation does not imply causation. Many college students now take the correlation of a demographic trait or identity of an individual with an outcome gap, perceiving that discrimination caused the outcome gap. With these assumptions constantly being made and other explanations unable to be reached, the students will not be able to arrive at an accurate understanding. Without fully understanding a problem, there is only a small chance that it can be solved. Now time to present my final thoughts of the book as a whole. Ultimately, I found The Coddling of the American Mind to be a very enlightening and educational book that allowed me to look further into the issues relevant to my generation, as well as the weaknesses in a common parenting style today. As a daughter and a college student, I was able to reflect on how I was raised and how this may unconsciously affect my success in college and the world afterwards. In an even broader scope, I can take a closer look at my university and be able to identify and analyze the culture of safety. I will now discuss the strengths of the book. The book succeeds in having a strong organizational structure, giving examples to support claims made, and using language that is easy to understand. The book is clearly separated into different parts and chapters. It starts out with an introduction, followed by part 1 of the book, featuring 3 chapters, one about each great untruth. Following is part 2, describing the bad ideas in action, as intimidation, violence, and witch hunts. Part 3 of the book illustrates what topics affected the violent events described in Part 2, such as polarization, depression, and paranoid parenting. Part 4 offers advice on how to improve on these topics and create wiser kids, universities, and societies. Throughout these chapters, many examples are used to support the author's argument. These examples include statistics such as adolescent depression rates, anecdotes such as one from Greg Lukianoff himself, real-world implications such as the UC Berkeley riot, and visuals such as tables and graphs. In the anxiety and depression chapter, many graphs are seen throughout, offering statistical data as well as supporting the claims made in the text. The book is easy for almost any audience to understand due to the style of writing and infrequent use of high-level or super advanced vocabulary words. While still maintaining an academic tone, the authors are able to write an educational book that can be read, understood, and applied by all audiences. Weaknesses of the book include bias towards a certain political party and negligence to other factors that can contribute to families' views about college. In the book, the authors most frequently reference how right-wing politics and their provocation cause much of the political turmoil and protests, such as the violent UC Berkeley protest. Due to the inclusion of more conservative-caused conflicts, the authors are able to paint Republicans in a bad light and imply that conservative extremists specifically have worsened campus climates and polarization. Another factor that can contribute to families' views and attitudes about college is the cost. With the increase in polarization and depression as described in the book, the cost of college and the amount of debt students will be in afterwards has also greatly increased. I believe that this factor should be explored in the book as well, since it is a large concern for families and students when it comes to college and may affect the culture of safetyism. In conclusion, I enjoyed The Coddling of the American Mind and would recommend it to parents and families in order for them to acknowledge and analyze their parenting style and how it can affect their children in the future. However, I would also recommend this book to college students so that they can self-reflect on their own childhoods and culture of safetyism in their university today. Thanks for watching my book review!